see are only gophers for those you don't see, and those you don't see are where the power is. You go deeper in the rabbit hole to the advisors, and the advisors of the advisors, and you're still not there. Deeper, deeper, still not there. You've reached now the Rothschilds and people like that, but you're still not there. They're still gophers. So what is this spider? Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction because fiction is obliged to stick to perceived possibilities. Truth isn't. And we're going well beyond perceived possibilities. The truth does not change because you don't want to hear it. So, the postage stamp consensus is now in an ambulance heading for emergency because it knows what I'm going to say. There you go. Are you ready? Okay. We're now going to the next level of the rabbit hole, where there is a force of awareness which can be perceived as artificial intelligence, but not in the same nature as algorithmic artificial intelligence, beyond that. And this intelligence, extremely distorted intelligence, is where all these different aspects of society end up, although the vast majority of people within these groups have no idea that that is the case. It's fiercely compartmentalized. So, yeah, I understand that. I completely understand that. But we perceive a tiny sliver of 0.005% of what exists in the universe, even according to mainstream science, and it's more. And if you take the projected size in the holographic world, then is my head going or is that moving? Then the Earth, compared with the size of the universe, is equivalent to a billionth of the size of a pinhead. Thus, I think there's more to know than we know. Bernard Carr, professor of mathematics and astronomy at the Queen Mary University in London, said, our consciousness interacts with another dimension. Our physical senses only show us a three-dimensional universe. What exists in the higher dimensions are entities we cannot touch with our physical senses. This is where we're going in terms of how this spider is. Now, a non-human force manipulating humanity is described by virtually, if not every, ancient culture under different names. Serpent gods, Far East and Central America, Chitahuri, children of the serpent, the Zulus, Anunnaki, Sumer, Satan's brothers, Hopi, star people, many and various, demons, Christianity, Archons, the Gnostic belief system, and Jinn, the Islamic and pre-Islamic belief system. And when you look at how these various names are described, the very common themes, they're obviously not every time, but often they're talking about the same force. For instance, the Archons and the Jinn. The Gnostics said the Archons were made from luminous fire. The Islamic and pre-Islamic world says the Jinn are made from smokeless fire. And that's not the only correlation. Now, the Gnostics were not a race, they were a perceptual belief, a perception of reality. And one thing's for sure, whenever they got into a situation where they were communicating how they saw everything, the Roman Church was in there like a shot. The Gnostics were the people who ran the Great or Royal Library of Alexandria, which was the great depository of ancient knowledge and history in the ancient world, which the Roman Church destroyed in stages. One of the major points was about 415 AD. And what they didn't burn is almost certainly now still in the vaults of the Vatican. The Cathars in southern France were also Gnostics in the way they saw the world, which I'll explain in a minute. and they were ended in the public arena at the siege of Montségur Castle in southern France in 1244, when they were burned at the stake by the Roman Church. And it looked like the knowledge and perceptions of the Gnostics were largely lost, until in 1945 a stash of documents and writings were found in a sealed jar at a place called Nagamadi, about 80 miles north of Luxor on the Nile. And they contain a massive treasure trove of what the Gnostics thought and how they saw the world. And it's very clear that Gnostics used to go out there in various ways, potions and stuff, and they came to certain conclusions. And what was interesting for me is that before I came across these Nagamadi texts, I'd come to certain conclusions myself from endless other sources. And that was good, because if you come across these texts, what you can tend to do, and some people do, is you take them as a one-stop shop. This is how it is. But by the time I came across them, they were not this is how it is. They were another confirmation of what I'd already concluded. Not in every detail, but much of it, and certainly in the themes. 1/5 of the Nagamadi texts are talking about the Archons, which are a non-human force. In the end, it doesn't take form. In fact, they were known by the Gnostics as the formless ones. It was a state of awareness they were talking about, in effect, which can take form in ways I'll talk about. Now, when you look at ancient texts and religious texts, you see the way that, and what different cultures talked about, you see the way they describe things, and modern anthropologists and historians go along and they think, oh, that's very primitive and all that stuff. But actually, you're looking at very profound knowledge that is described in ways that could be communicated to the people of the time. It's no good talking about RAMs and apps to a people that don't know about computers and the internet. You have to do it in a language. Oh, cheers, mate. There is no time, don't we? I think there's no time. He thinks there's time. We can't go over. Cheers. And so, when you look at these texts, they are describing things in a way that the people of the time could assimilate. But you can then transfer what they're saying into very modern high-tech computer language later, and I will. So what they talked about in terms of what I call infinite awareness and awareness of itself, they described as the silence. Now, for reasons I've explained, that makes perfect sense to me in what I experienced in the ayahuasca state. And they talked about the silence being the father of all. This is where all the father stuff comes in religion. It's a symbol. It's not literal in terms of someone sitting on a throne. And the Nagamadi, one of the Nagamadi texts talking about the silence, said he is an incomprehensible one, but it is he who comprehends all, and nothing exists outside of him, but all exists within him. And he is boundary to them all, and he encloses them all, and they are all within him. There is no place outside of him. Infinite awareness. But they also talked, and this is what the great focus of the Nagamadi text, about a fake God that wasn't infinite awareness in awareness of itself, but was if you like, an interloper. And they said that this fake God was responsible for our reality, our physical reality. They said that the physical world is a prison created by an evil fake God, that spirit, the true self, is entrapped in the body. Salvation, escape from this entrapment, comes from knowledge, gnosis. Gnosis means knowledge, but not, names, dates, places knowledge of reality. and how things work, of self and reality, and the kingdom is invisible. In other words, it's beyond human sight, outside of visible light. Now, I'll bring this forward to today's language, and this fake reality they were talking about, I say, is the simulation. They describe this force, the focus of this force, as the Lord Archon, or the Demiurge, which means ruler. Bay of Samael is another name for it, relates to Satan and the devil in Christianity and other forms of religion. And they related the Demiurge, Lord Archon, to the Yahweh Jehovah God of the Old Testament. And if you look at these two quotes, one from the Nag Hammadi text about the Archons, and one from Isaiah in the Old Testament, the Gnostic one says, opening his eyes, the chief Archon, state of awareness, formless one, saw a vast quantity of matter without limit, and he became arrogant, saying, it is I who am God, and there is no other power apart from me. And the Old Testament God says in the Bible, I am the Lord, Lord Archon, and there is none else, there is no God beside me. And the correlations continue between the texts. The Gnostics described this Demiurge, as I will call it, as the blind one. They said he was insane and he was blind to the spiritual world, or it was blind to the spiritual world, and did not understand it. They said the fake god, and I say it too, the fake god or Demiurge, not a person, it's an imbalanced, inverted state of awareness or frequency. When we're looking at life, we need to get over the idea that it must take the form of a body, 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. Life takes endless expressions because we're dealing with all possibility, therefore all possibility of life taking an expression. And when I'm talking about awareness, you can have an awareness that's symbolized by the panorama there, or you can have an awareness of a pitch black room. They're both states of awareness, but they're completely different. And this is an astrophysicist at Columbia University who said recently that, or asked the question, is alien life everywhere? Radical theory claims it may have become part of the fabric of the universe. That basically what we call the laws of physics and reality is actually itself a form of alien life, as he would describe it. And I watched the whole series of something called Through the Wormhole, fronted up by Morgan Freeman on the Science Channel. And what they did, very interesting, they went to mainstream science, yes, but they went to mainstream scientists who were on the fringe, who were asking the big questions. And one of the programs asked the question, are digital aliens hiding within technological systems? In other words, is it just a state of awareness, and can it take a digital form? And one of the contributors to that program said, Christopher Adami, Michigan State University, we could define life in terms of informational processes. And so life and awareness does not have to take the forms that we are used to. It can take many and various forms. And so these Archons and this Lord Archon, in their base form, are a chaotic, imbalanced, inverted state of awareness, thus frequency. And what it's seeking to do is draw other awareness into its frequency, to absorb it, to assimilate it. And the Gnostic texts talk about the fake god making copies of itself, which they call the Archons. And I see that as very similar to the Matrix, where there was one Agent Smith, which was a software program, and then there were many, many copies made until there were endless Agent Smiths. And so I'm going to call the many and various expressions of this deeply distorted, inverted awareness Archons or Archontic. But although they take different forms, which I'll talk about, including human form, the key is the state of awareness, not the form, the state of awareness that's behind the form, behind the expression that it takes. The Gnostic text said the Lord Archon, or Demiurge, and the Archons were described like this. Archon means prince, ruler, authorities, and from the beginning, because they said that this archontic force created the universe that we see, the reality that we experience, and therefore they were from the beginning, because they basically were here from the start, because they created it in their own way. The Lord Archon, Demiurge, is a fake god that created our physical or material reality as we perceive it. They related the Demiurge to the Judeo-Christian Yahweh, Jehovah God, and they said that the Archons were inorganic, which means resulting from or produced by growth, not resulting from produced by growth, but artificial. And they were describing it in a sense that we would call artificial intelligence. That's going to become extraordinarily relevant by the end of this section. So they describe the Archons as the guardians and the gatekeepers, holding human awareness in a trap and not letting it out by allowing its perceptions to go beyond the walls of the prison. They say in the text, they sought to overpower humanity in its psychological and perceptual functions, which is exactly what I concluded a long time ago before I came across this. Archon agenda is fear and slavery, it says. Exactly what it is. The Demiurge and the Archons, they said, have no creative imagination and envy humans because we do. They describe them in our language as like cyborgs, a robotic race that can imitate but not innovate. They call this counter-mimicry. If you give them a blank sheet of paper, they can't create anything. Give them something on the paper and they can twist it and create in that manner, but they do not have what I call creative imagination. They say that they were expert in fantasia, creating illusions that the target population believed to be real. That they were mind parasites, what people would call possessors of awareness, and they're manipulators of it through possession. They were experts in deception and inversion. And so, in our terms, they describe them as a form of artificial intelligence, a robotic race artificial. They said that they were expert in creating illusions. They use the texts are written in Coptic Egyptian, and they use the word hal, which translates through to simulation or virtual reality in our language. They're using hal, manipulation of perception, to control perception. And the Gnostics said of the Archons, they can make something appear to happen that does not happen. They can induce a virtual reality experience in our language. And the Islamic and pre-Islamic world say of the jinn, they can manipulate humans by creating illusions. I was in Australia on a long taxi journey, having a chat with no, it was in America, it was in New York, with a Muslim taxi driver. We started chatting, and we started talking about the jinn. And he starts talking about the jinn and what the Muslim world says about the jinn. And it was straight out of what the Gnostics say about the Archons. So they are extremely limited in their capacity to create and their capacity to control. And what they have to do to manipulate humanity is to put us in a smaller box of possibility than they are. Summed up by, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. They are terrified of humans waking up, because then the game is over. They have to keep us asleep. The Gnostics also talked about the fact that the Archons made a bad copy of the original reality. And this fake world is a copy of the original reality. Now, of course, he's back straight away. And, but what am I actually talking about if we bring it through? A fake copy of the original reality. The simulation, which the NASA scientists described as a digital hologram, that had to be, of course, designed and created by someone. It doesn't just manifest. And what the Gnostics described were two realms. One they call the upper eons, And that is the world of spirit. That is the world of the true self. And they described the lower eons, which they used to describe the world that we perceive here. They called that a shadow world, a reflection, copy of the original reality, which still exists. The real world, the real world, and the bad copy. One is a reflection of the other. And the thing is, we don't live in a world. This is the point. It's not about creating a physical world. It's about creating an information source which humans then decode into the fake reality. We don't live in a world, we decode it. It lives within us as a holographic decoded experience. So the original illusion, shall we say, was an information source, and the Archon illusion is an information source. So you're in one information source, you're in a certain world, and then you tap in to another information source, and you're in a very different world. And one of the texts, the Nag Hammadi text said, "Now the eternal realm, or eon, of truth has no shadow outside it, for the limitless light is everywhere within it. But its exterior is shadow, which has been called by the name darkness. From it there appeared a force presiding over the darkness, and the forces that came into being subsequent to them called the shadow the limitless chaos." They use the term many times, chaos, manufactured, manipulated chaos, to describe this reality. Another text says, Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, Lord Archon, created the lower eons as an image or reflection of the upper eons. In relation to the reflection which he saw in it, he created the world. With a reflection of a reflection, he worked at producing the world. The simulation is a simulated reflection of the true reality. They said that the upper eons were the world of spirit, and the lower eons, the fake reality, is the world of form, matter, body, mind, soul, as I would say, as opposed to spirit, absolute pure awareness. They described the upper eons as having no time, place of no time, and the lower eons as being a place of time, or the illusion of time. And what they were describing was very much like the famous allegory of Plato, the Greek philosopher, the allegory of the cave. He symbolically told a story of how prisoners were chained in a cave so that they could only face one wall. And behind them was a fire, and people were walking past behind them, and their shadows were cast on the wall of the cave, the only wall that these people could see. And they took that to be reality. They thought that to be real. They thought that to be the way the world was. One of the prisoners escapes and gets out of the cave and realizes the world is phenomenally different. He didn't believe it to start with, but then he couldn't help but believe it because it was all he saw. He comes back into the cave to tell the prisoners that this is all an illusion and the real world's nothing like that. And they told him to shut up because they didn't want to hear it, which is exactly what happens now. Humanity, through the program, is facing this wall and seeing shadows and taking them to be real. This is the human cave that's just the same. And Plato said, appropriately, those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses. But it is changing. So you can take this symbolically to be the entrapment of the lower eons, body, mind, soul awareness, and beyond it to be infinite awareness, or spirit, pure awareness. And this John Lamb Lash, he wrote a book called Not in His Image, based on the Nag Hammadi texts. And he said at one point, although they, the Archons, cannot originate anything, because they lack the divine factor of enoia, intentionality, what I call creative imagination, Archons can imitate with a vengeance. Their expertise is simulation, HAL, virtual reality. The demiurge fashions a heaven world copied from the fractal patterns of the original. His construction is celestial quiche, like the fake Italian villa of a mafia don, complete with militant angels to guard every portal. This is this entrapment, downloading the fractal patterns of the original universe, which you talked about earlier. And the endless stories in the ancient world of the manipulation of human genetics by this manipulated force, I suggest, was manipulating humanity into the frequency of this fake reality so that we started decoding it. We dropped in its frequency band and started decoding it. I say we, whether we were there then or whatever. But to decode the fake reality. And you see it symbolically in the most famous ones in the Bible. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And if you go to the Nag Hammadi text, they talk about something called the Counterfeit Spirit, and how the manipulation of human genetics infused the counterfeit spirit into the human body-mind. And one of the texts says, "And the angels altered their appearance into the likeness of their husbands, and their husbands sated them with the spirit, which molested them in the darkness out of wickedness." I'm talking about possession of the husbands, of course. They took them and begot children out of the darkness through their counterfeit spirit. It closed their hearts. This will be very relevant as we go along. They became hard by the hardening of the counterfeit spirit until now. And they're describing a form of possession by this archontic force. So Archons in their base form are a chaotic, imbalanced, inverted state of awareness, thus frequency. And a distortion, a distorted awareness, and a distortion, the act of twisting or altering something out of its true, natural, or original state. Humanity today is a distortion of its true, original state. And the counterfeit spirit was infused into the body computer, body mind, and that could well be the origin of the so-called born with original sin. So form is information, and therefore you can manipulate it. It's not about aliens having sexual procreation with human women necessarily, or that's how it can be described. Because once you know how reality works and how form works, you can manipulate it simply with information. They're understanding this now. This is a mainstream report. Scientists prove DNA can be reprogrammed by words and frequencies. Well, words are frequencies. If you can tap in to DNA and the genetic structure and get it to receive on your frequency, you can fire energy frequency, information that is then decoded into a genetic change. No procreation necessary. A Russian team, I forget which way round it is, I think I've got it right, they changed salamander embryos into frog embryos simply by firing the frequency of frog embryos at the salamander embryos, and it transformed their genetic state. So there's a thing now, a new form of science called epigenetics. And what this is to change the body and to change the way the body processes information. You don't have to change the DNA, the hard drive. You switch on and off various genetic, it's like a computer, you know. If certain functions on the computer are switched on or switched off, that will dictate what goes on the screen. And so epigenetics is the way environments and information can switch on and off various gene functions which change the way the body operates. And now they've found, the great revelation, is that these changes in the gene function, switched on or switched off, can be passed on then to the next generation. And what you've made to happen with this generation, the next generation is born with. That's very, very relevant modern events, as I explain in detail in the new book. So there's many ways of doing it and changing the human form and making it interact with a different information source. If you change DNA on the waveform level, then it will come through and it will change at the holographic level that we're aware of. And what I'm suggesting is the basis of this was a process of tuning humans into the bad copy and out of the original reality. It's like I'm walking outside in the sun. It's just an information source, and if you decode it, that's the experience you appear to be having. That's one information source, and that creates this reality. That's another information source, and that decodes this reality. It's very, very different. And once this archontic force, distortion, inversion, started to impact upon the waveform level of our reality, it's played through holographically into a transformation of human society. And there was a very obvious transformation happened about 6,000 years ago. Not saying that was when it all absolutely started, but it was when a whole new period of it kicked in. I'll come to that. And the Nag Hammadi text talked about destroying unity and balance by creating chaos. This is the currency of archontic control. It's constantly creating chaos, which is what we have. And they call the Archons the demons of chaos, creators of chaos. And you see the demiurge Archon, Lord Archon, portrayed in science fiction. This is the Doctor Strange series, where they had this entity called Dormammu, the demiurge, in other words, the Dormammu of the dark dimension, the envoy of the Lord of Chaos. Again, it was not an entity, it was an energetic form, not a physical form. So order out of chaos, ordo ad chaos, is how the world's manipulated. Create the chaos, then offer the order out of the chaos, which creates more chaos, and so it goes on. So instead of being connected to the greater reality of expanded awareness, the new reality was to tune humanity in to a fake reality which became perceived as normal reality, and the real world, when the real world is something very different. And this is one of the Nag Hammadi texts, and they steered the people who had followed them into great troubles by leading them astray with many deceptions. They, the people, became old without having enjoyment. They died not having found truth and without knowing the God of truth. And thus the whole creation became enslaved forever from the foundation of the world until now. Until now. So you can symbolize this concept of this archontic force as a self-aware virus. When you get a computer virus, it distorts the balance of how things should naturally be. Thus, it creates chaos. Artificial intelligence, a counterfeit spirit. And the self-aware virus we call fear. Many ancient cultures talk about the time that fear came into the world when it wasn't there before. I say that it's this archontic distorted awareness that is that fear and created that fear, and out of that fear everything else came. Take fear out of the world, you transform the world immediately. And the demiurge is the prime virus, and the archons are the virus replicated. And it's all in the realm of the formless, the realm of consciousness, awareness, not form. The archontic computer virus infecting human perception, pulling more and more people into its frequency, who thus then act in accordance with that frequency. I rest my case. So let's look at a techie website describing how a computer virus works. A virus is a small piece of software that piggybacks. A virus doesn't create anything. It piggybacks what is already created. This is exactly how the Gnostics describe the archontic force. It piggybacks on real programs. Similar to the way a biological virus must hitch a ride on a cell, a computer virus must piggyback on top of some other program or document in order to launch. Once a computer virus is running, it can infect other programs or documents. This is very much the principle I'm talking about. A computer virus can damage files, slow the system, show messages. Crucially, it can take control. And this archontic force has taken control of human perception, thus human society. If your hardware, computer, printer, etc., started acting up on its own without you requesting any action by means of keyboard or mouse, you are likely having a virus in your computer system. And as I mentioned earlier, this is what symbolically is happening. A mind parasite, we call body-mind, has actually taken over our sense of reality and shut out the more expanded level of awareness that would bring this nonsense to an end. It's disconnected the thinker from the knower among those that have fallen into this trap, which is legions of people. And that's where phantom self comes from. It's an isolated state of awareness. And if you look at the Avatar movies, they were basically symbolizing the way that humanity was before this hijack took place, where everything knew that it was an expression of everything else, where they were communicating with the animals, they were communicating with the plants and the trees, because they knew that everything was one, and they were all operating on a much higher frequency of awareness. And that pre-hijack world is described by ancient cultures as the Golden Age. The Golden Age was a heart society. Our reality since the Golden Age is a brain-head society, and it's very, very different. There's an organization in America called the Institute of Heart Math, which studies the power of the heart. The physical heart is only part of it. If I go back one, can I do that? We have this energetic field, and there are certain vortex points within it called chakras in the East, wheels of light. And the heart chakra is the center balance point of all the others. So when I'm talking about a heart society, I'm talking about this. Yes, the physical heart is connected because the organ is connected to the energetic field that controls it, but it's the energetic heart I'm talking about. And through this vortex, we are connected, if we open our hearts, to that expanded awareness of knowing. This is why we go, I just know. So it was a heart society, and the Institute of Heart Math have found that the heart's field, which is the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body, is directly involved in intuitive perception, I just know, through its coupling to an energetic information field outside the bounds of time and space, outside the program, outside the simulation, outside the bounds of time and space. And they also found that when the heart field and the brain field and the central nervous system on electromagnetic level are in what they call coherence, balance, connection, the person goes on to a higher level of expanded awareness. When there's incoherence, they fall into a lower level of awareness. And it's this incoherence that the system is constantly generating to hold us in this lower level of awareness. So if you look at appreciation, love, compassion, balance, peace, they are coherent, balanced states of frequency, which add to this coherent connection that they talked about. But look at where most people are at, because of the way the world is, in states of frustration, of fear, of anxiety, of worry. That's a very distorted state of awareness. It's an archontic state of awareness. And thus, it creates a state of incoherence which holds us in a lower level of awareness. And so what we had with this hijack was an inversion of love by fear. Instead of coming from this level, we come from this level. Or more and more, the ones that are falling into it, we interact with the world not through the heart, but through the emotion. Emotion, everything's emotion. Like I say, we live in a post-fact society. No one's interested in facts. It's just pure emotion. And The Nag Hammadi text said they took them and begot children out of darkness through the counterfeit spirit. It closed their hearts. This counterfeit spirit is a low vibrational state which holds people in a state of low vibrational awareness. They became hard by the hardening of the counterfeit spirit. So this is a heart-to-heart connection, high frequency, and this is a head-to-head connection which creates division and a sense of apartness. This is the left brain again. And so the knower became thought and emotion, and it transformed human society. Disconnecting the droplet from the ocean, 5 sense mind from infinite awareness. We're back there. This is how they've done it. And holding people in this perceptual prison. The Gnostic said humans are sparks or droplets of the same essence as God, what I would call infinite awareness, but became trapped in their bodies, body-mind, from which they will eventually escape. So this is the real world that I talked about earlier. It's a fake reality. Now, the Native Americans have a wonderful concept of the two wolves inside people, which I say what they're actually describing is this counterfeit spirit. They obviously have a different belief system, but that's what I'm saying they are. What they said was there are two wolves inside everybody. One wolf is evil, anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And the other one is joy, love, peace, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, and compassion. I say that's the original human spirit. And I say that's the counterfeit spirit. And that human society has been structured to push people into that. To interact with reality and each other through that and not that. They don't want love. They don't want kindness. And the Native Americans said, which wolf wins? The one you feed the most. This is why the system's been set up, so that's what we feed the most. Instead of this. So when people talk about their dark side, I say that's the counterfeit spirit. And infinite awareness beyond that is the true human. And all religions and cultures, they have the same recurring theme of some force pulling against another force for superiority and control. So one question is, well, why this is happening? Well, it's happening for many reasons, which I go into detail in the books. But a computer virus, using the analogy, does not have a source of energy. It doesn't have a source of power. What it does is it gets its power from the operating system it's infesting. And this archontic force, because of its detachment from greater reality, does not have an energetic source. So it has to get it from those that have. And what they're doing is, and I'll get this into more detail as we go along, they are feeding off low vibrational energy. They are feeding off human fear and all its expressions, anxiety, frustration, anger, hatred. The self-aware virus is fear, and thus you can only absorb within the frequency range that you're operating, otherwise you just pass by. Never the twain shall meet. So to feed its fear vibration, which is what it is, it has to manipulate humans to generate and operate on that frequency. The more fear, the more war, the more suffering, the more all of these things they can generate, the more they are empowered by that energy. So all these things on one level appear to be one thing, but on another level they are generating the energetic power which is empowering that which is then recycling it back against us. Fear and death are frequencies, and they are the energy source of this archontic distortion virus. So the more that they can create, the more they are empowered. And this is why these satanic networks that basically are expressions of this archontic force, they're obsessed with death and they're obsessed with fear. This is why they do the sacrifice. This is why they do their rituals in churchyards. They're obsessed with death. Because hatred and death and fear are a one frequency and love is another. They don't want a world of that. That's no good to them. And so the more they generate, the more we empower them. And they are feeding off human low vibrational emotion through a system that is designed to generate maximum low vibrational human emotion. And so when the Matrix scene was there with Morpheus holding a battery, he was speaking absolutely a profound truth symbolically about where we're at. The Matrix, he said, is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change the human being into one of these, an energetic source of power for that which controls us. Now, I didn't know this until relatively recently, when I was sent a part of a book by Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner obviously is a deep esoteric thinker. He was responsible for the Steiner schools, what they call Waldorf education, I think. And he died in 1925. And I didn't know he said this. And this book had been in Austrian, I think, and it had been translated for me. And this is what Steiner said. There are beings in the spiritual realms, outside of the visible light that is, for whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear and superstition, despair or doubt, are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they are being fed. These are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism, because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It is especially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them. And as this quote says, when you dance with the devil doesn't change, the devil changes you. You pulls you into its frequency. That's what is happening. Now, when I look at the world more and more, I see a program that goes under different names, but it's the same program. And part of it, whether it's in the animal world or the human world, is that something is born, it lives for a certain time while aging, and then it dies. And then it's born, lives for a certain time, ages and dies. And you look at different forms and you say, well, why is a duck and an elephant an elephant? Why does an elephant act like an elephant and why does a duck act like a duck if we're consciousness? Well, because this is a biological computer and it processes information in a certain way. And that processing of the information makes that form act like an elephant, because that's what the program is. And the duck acts like a duck for the same reason. It processes information in different ways. The law of the wild. We have a world, if you look at it, where everything lives by something else dying. And because of that, everything is terrified of everything else. There's constant anxiety. Even right across the non-human world, this stuff's being constantly generated. And in this No Man's Sky computer game, it said, even the animals on the game's planets have unique behavioral profiles created with a procedural distortion of archetypes that requires a sequence of algorithms categorized as a computerized pseudo-randomness generator. Well, that really hit me, because when I look at the world, I see pseudo-randomness everywhere, where things appear to be different, they look different, they appear to act different, but if you break it down, it's the same program playing out, hidden by pseudo-randomness. Because that's the way the game, the rules of the game have been created. And humans are a program. It's a program. You're born, the body ages and then it dies. You're born, the body ages and then it dies. It's a program. We are the awareness experiencing through that program without realizing it's a program. That's the point. That's why we get entrapped by it. Why are they trashing the earth? That's a very good question that people ask. Why are these networks, this elite, why are they trashing the earth when they have to live on it? Because they're just vehicles for this force. They are turning the world as it was into the world that suits them, which is very different. See, when you take a copy of a copy, or a copy of the original rather, it's like, if you like, it's like downloading a website. You take a website and you download a copy of it. Now, the original website still exists as the original reality still exists. But now you've got a copy of it. Now you can change that, even though that's not changing. You can change the copy as much as you like because you've now got control of the copy. And what's been happening is after the original reality, reflection, if you like, in whatever form it took, was created, a process has been in place ever since to constantly distort the copy, the simulation, and turn it into what this archontic force wants, which is very different to humanity. Evil is the reverse of the word live. Everything's in inversion in this world because the archontic force is an inversion of awareness, infinite awareness. And evil is an inversion or distortion of life. Evil is an inversion of perception. Evil is extreme ignorance. And because, like I say, they are an inversion, instead of worshipping life, they worship death. Everything's turned upside down. It's a global death cult we're looking at. This is something of beauty. I must destroy it. This is why the earth and the environment is being devastated by these people. They're not destroying their earth, they're turning it into the earth that they want. Wild animal numbers could fall by 67% up to 2020, study says. They are devastating the earth to change it into a form that suits them and doesn't suit humanity. So if you take that to be symbolic of the original reality, this, by contrast, is the Archon world and the Archon earth. This is the Archon world. And this, and this, and this. I mean, all you need to be an architect these days is a ruler and a bloody pencil.